Well, many of you may have been driving around Central Texas recently and noticing the fall foliage this year, especially over the past couple of weeks, has been very vibrant. We have an expert here from the Texas A&M Forest Service, Allison Bayless, to help us understand why. Now, Allison, I know going into the early fall, it had been a really hot and extremely dry summer, and we were thinking that could kind of mute some of the fall foliage, but it appears that here over the past couple of weeks, things have been pretty vibrant. Walk us through how all of that has worked out.
Yeah, so initially we were anticipating a less than spectacular fall color season. However, given the weather that we had in November, the combination of extended cold temperatures combined with some rain, that has really allowed the fall color to come through.
Yeah, and it makes sense when you look at the weather patterns. Like you said, we had only about a ½ inch of rain in September, way below average. October, normally one of our wettest and stormiest months, only about 2 inches of rain. But here in November, all of a sudden over 4 inches of rain. But what's the mechanism inside the trees where they get this added precipitation going into the more dormant season? What's happening in the trees that, causes all this color to pop out?
Sure. So within the leaves, you typically see the green leaf through most of the year. That's going to be the chlorophyll pigment within the leaves. And then as the weather gets cooler and the daylight hours get shorter as we move into the fall, then you have that chlorophyll production lessening. So less chlorophyll reveals some of the other pigments that we see in the leaves, like the pigment responsible for the yellow color, that's carotenoids. And then also combined in that as well, with that cooler weather and more rain, you also get an increased production in anthocyanins. And so that's the red color that we see. So it's a combination of decreasing green plus revealing the colors that are underneath, as well as the increase of some additional pigments.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think a lot of us think about the rain, of course, and the impact that it has. But temperature-wise, what you're saying is that makes a big impact, too. You look at September and October. September especially was very hot. We were nearly 2 degrees above the average temperature for the month. But here in November, things have been much cooler. So it's not just the precipitation that has an impact, but it's the cooler weather. And I guess, as you're saying, it depends on when exactly that cooler weather arrives.
Yes, exactly. It is the combination of cooler weather as well as the rain.
And what about the timeline here? I know the week of Thanksgiving, that is oftentimes what we associate for kind of peak fall foliage here in Central Texas. Is that usually the case, and have things been kind of on that timeline this year, even though we kind of had to wait a little bit to get some of the rain?
So drought can push the timeline back just a little bit. Really now is going to be peak. It sort of started there at Thanksgiving. Now is the peak time. And so I encourage your viewers to get out and view the fall color while they can, while it's still here.
So with this being the peak, how much longer do you think we have before things start to kind of lose the color going into the winter?
Oh, well, it depends on the weather primarily. We could get a strong wind or rainstorm that could pull some of those leaves off the trees.
Yeah, well, weather-wise, it looks like, at least here in the short term, we're kind of transitioning out of that wetter weather pattern, and next week might be a little bit drier, so maybe that will kind of shift things with the trees. But Allison, thank you so much. That was very helpful. We appreciate your insight into the fall foliage this year.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks.